All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another session in our United Through Heritage series. Today, we're talking about internships within the Portuguese community and in Portugal. And today I have with me Marco Fernandes, who is the CEO of Sagres Vacations based in Massachusetts, and Ricardo Pereira, who is one of the head guys over at Sippin, the program that we all know and love very well. And so before we jump into the discussion, we do just have a few sponsors to recognize who made this series possible. FLAD is our major underwriter for the series, so we thank them for their continued support, and we do have a brief message from them.
Levar os portugueses mais longe. Ser uma ponte entre Portugal e os Estados Unidos da América. Esta é a missão da Fundação Luso-Americana para o Desenvolvimento. A FLAD nasceu em 1985 na sequência do Acordo das Lajes e por aqui passaram até hoje milhares de pessoas e ideias que ajudámos a transformar em realidade. Promovemos a partilha de conhecimento e experiências através de bolsas de estudo, estágios, prémios e conferências unindo os dois lados do Atlântico. Trabalhamos diretamente com a comunidade portuguesa nos Estados Unidos. Queremos contribuir para que o papel dos luso-americanos seja cada vez mais forte e para que as origens portuguesas sejam continuamente celebradas. Nesta ligação atlântica surgem, claro, os Açores. Pela sua importância geoestratégica de segurança e defesa, científica e cultural, são um ponto essencial na atividade da FLAD. Somos ciência, educação, arte e relações transatlânticas. Há 36 anos a contribuir para o desenvolvimento de Portugal e dos portugueses.
We'd also like to thank Licor Beirão for their support of the series, Portugalia Marketplace in Fall River, Massachusetts, also UMass Lowell, Anchor Construction, the Atlantis Agency, the Navigator Company, and MD VIP. And one last word on the slides. If you find these sessions valuable, the whole series or any of the virtual sessions that we host throughout the year, please become a member of PALCUS. It's through our membership dues and support of the community that we're able to make these available for free to the community and have such a wide variety of topics addressed. So very easy to join the organization. Just visit our website and it's right there at the top. Join us today and you can be a member in 5 minutes. So with that, let's just jump into the discussion. I'm going to start with Ricardo, and to set the stage, Ricardo is going to be talking about the program itself, what it's like to do an internship, answer some questions. So if you have questions, pop them into the chat or pop them into the Facebook Live so that we can answer your questions live. And then Marco is here from a business standpoint to talk about why it's valuable to have an internship and even his experience in hiring interns and that sort of thing. So Ricardo, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about the Sippin Summer Internship Program, which is the program that PALCUS partners with FLAD and Sippin to have our own interns go to Portugal during the summer.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angela. Thanks for the opportunity. To talk a little bit about the program, of course, it helps that you've just shown a little clip about FLAD, about what FLAD does, and this specific program that is within, of course, FLAD's portfolio, the Study in Portugal Network. What it does is to try to facilitate and create like an easy way for students in the US to have the chance to come to Portugal to study abroad. And when I say study abroad also entails internship options. Just a little brief history about why FLAD entered into this equation of student mobility. So this program, the SiPN program, the Study in Portugal Network, started in 2014 and is a program that is directly managed by FLAD, of course, in partnership with the Portuguese universities here, located in Lisbon. And also we have a small collaboration with the University of the Azores for summer initiatives. And why did we do that? So at the time, FLAD had sponsored other initiatives, other programs to try to excel, to try to grow the numbers of students from the US doing studies and work in Portugal. But the results weren't that great in terms of numbers. Looking at the trends, we're still very residual when comparing to other European countries. And that's when FLAD decided, knowing our mission, which is to promote the development of Portugal through bilateral relations with the United States, and knowing the value of having young, motivated students here, they become, real ambassadors for Portugal, for FLAD, for the universities. FLAD decided to step forward and create the SiPN program to try to grow those numbers. So the program has now 6 years. Of course, this last year wasn't so great in terms of mobility, but it's been a great experience, and we think that it has all the means to grow. To talk a little bit and to focus on internships. Yes, it is correct that we have a summer internship program, but students can also come to Portugal, to Sippin, to do an internship over a semester. Okay, so there's these two. So study abroad doesn't mean degree seeking, right? Doesn't mean entire programs. It is during a program in a US university. So a mobility of one semester, one summer, or one academic year maximum, just to locate a little bit. And so the students through Sippin have this option to come to Portugal to do an internship exclusively or in addition to coursework, both in the summer and in the semester. Sippin internships, of course, all of this is within an academic framework, right? So our internships are for academic credits, all of them. So that means that students participating in our internships are promoted internships, right? Because in this, we work like facilitators, right? We place students according to their interests and the needs of organizations, companies, institutions, research labs here in Portugal. So we're this matchmaking program, and in essence, this is what we make available. I don't know if I stop here, Angela, or if you want me to keep going with more specifics about our internship. I can keep going. So first of all, a student needs to be at university level, right? So at the bachelor's or master's level. Usually, this is the students that we serve. If he or she decides to do something like this, to study and or intern, needs to, of course, go to the studyinportugalnetwork.com page. First of all, read a little bit about what we do. Of course, it's normal. There are a lot of questions and a lot of things, and we're available to clarify those via email or sessions like this. And if they decide to apply, it's apply now, summer or semester, and we'll go from there. Just in essence, long story short, there's a first application step where a student just submits the basic profile information, name, home university, if a sophomore, freshman, anyways, just to describe. No need to upload anything at that phase, just so we can understand which student we have in front of us. And in the pre-application, the student can choose, yes, I do want to add an internship semester or summer. And if we validate that pre-application, we will be requiring or asking for additional documents just for the internship placement process. And those documents are a resume. It's quite simple. A resume, a student transcript, and the cover letter. Basically, a cover letter doesn't have any specific format. It's the document where the student can describe a little bit about his or her profile, what they have done in their academic career and even in their professional, which probably they don't have a lot to say professional-wise, but maybe volunteering, association, engagement with the community, and so on. And by looking at that, we initiate the placement process, which is to, okay, what kind of student we have in front of us, and how can we better serve the students in terms of placing accordingly, right, to meet the goals of the students. And then there's a big process of sometimes, going back and forth with options. Organizations might require to interview the students, which is, of course, a plus in our case for expectation management. But I think we'll be talking about expectation management a bit down the road in this session. And again, I would say like the main message here is that Sippin is fully designed to have this perfect match with US academia. Yes, we're talking about two different academic formats, two different business landscapes and way of doing things. Not so different, but yet there are differences. And the way we do the entire process, even from a bureaucratic point of view, and even in a more operational point of view, in terms of being faster to respond and to provide all the answers, everything is geared so student has this easy way moving forward, right? Easy way to, one-stop shop. I deal with these guys, they clarify all they need, and then we will bridge. Of course, if Angela, if you allow me to talk a little bit about the on-site piece, not so much about the internship, but in terms of how the process then works around the practical work. Student arrives, we as a program, we facilitate in terms of, orientation, also to the workplace setting. There's a first session in the university, right, in the academic setting. Again, this is for academic credit. So besides all the practical work that students develop, they also need to meet the criteria of the course, let's say, right? So there is an evaluation, there is meetings during all throughout the semester and or summer. So there is always an academic supervision done by what we call the Sippin's experiential learning coordinator, right? So there's a triangle, right? You have the supervisor at work, you have the academic supervisor, let's say at university, and the student itself. We Sippin, let's say we're in the middle, making sure that all the parties connect and everything makes sense, from a safe and health standpoint, from a academic goal standpoint, and so on. And in essence, I think I've covered the essentials in terms of the process, right? And then we can talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty stuff and the kinds of opportunities. But maybe I'll leave it here, Angela, if you agree.
Yeah, that would be great. Because I think we all want to talk about what subjects or what industries the internships can be in. And again, to your point about the expectations. But let's have Marco jump in and talk about, as a business, from a business perspective, talk a little bit about, your experiences having had to hire interns, and why having an internship is important, or even when you hire someone for an actual position, if they had internships before or not, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Angela, for the opportunity. It's always great to be talking to PALCUS about everything related to our culture. And I think internships in general, we're very lucky that our job, our industry is travel. In our company, Sagres Vacations, we promote and curate private tours in Portugal and Spain. So having someone, number one, from the country is already a plus. Having them experience an internship with our company and our staff, having real world life examples that are going to be such a key tool for them in the workplace, I think is an added bonus. And I wish I had these opportunities when I was certainly entering the workforce. And I think today's work environment is so dynamic that internship is key, because you're not reading from a book. There are, and I'm not here just talking about my industry in travel, but we can use these examples in healthcare, in science, in many other fields, because one thing is reading from a textbook, one thing is having a lecture, but the other thing is actually having to make key decisions during the cycle of a product, of a service, adjusting it for external conditions. And you can only get that really in the business environment. And I think, and sometimes some things, Angela, we fail to mention, we also learn from an intern that's coming in to do an internship with us, because they're coming with an outside perspective. So sometimes we fail, we're so locked into sort of showing them the ropes and giving them as much structure and an opportunity of what we're doing. But the reality is that many of the things we've implemented as a business have come from either staff that just started because they're seeing things from the level, or even interns because they have had other experiences or they've traveled before, and now they're able to plug those into real life examples. So I think, to Ricardo's point, I think it's a benefit, on both sides. There's obviously a lot of structure that goes into hosting the interns, but there's a real value in both from a business standpoint. And here I'm speaking personally, but I was also a student once, and I can say that it is very valuable to get a foothold in a industry and be able to be on the front line, let's say, of making those decisions.
And something, so those are all great points. I think one thing that you started to allude to and that we actually talked about in our prep conversation was that even if you major in travel management or hospitality, what you're being taught in the classroom, for whatever reason, doesn't really reflect the actual business environment. And I can say from a public relations and communications standpoint, that's actually very much the case. And I'm sure that others in other industries could say the same thing. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it's important? So maybe there's like, you're learning some fundamentals in the classroom, but really you need the internship to understand how things actually work.
100%. In the classroom, you're learning how to be able to interpret data, how to read a contract via a hotel contract in our line of industry, or how to create an itinerary, or how to manage flights and incorporate those into an existing program. The reality of it is that all of these things happen in sometimes very dynamic, very short span of time. So you don't have the luxury of pulling up Google or resource when you have a customer on the other line or in front of you who is telling you they can fly from 3 major airports in New York City. But going back to your experience in class, you only learned about JFK, but not Newark International Airport or possibly LaGuardia. And that's a great example because travel by nature is a variable. So it keeps on changing. So, there's only so much you can learn in class. And I'm sure it's the same in political science and all these other fields. As we evolve as humans and as business evolves and it becomes, a very international business, you not only have to learn the basics, but you also have to understand the culture. You have to understand how to do business in these countries, how to set the expectations, and things that you've learned in class. Although it's a good foundation, sometimes what we're dealing with is we actually have to have interns relearn from our side because we're being thrown a million directions. We're offering clients 3 different ways to get to one place because one of them involves one single connection versus a direct flight, but perhaps the customer chooses to go to one airport because they have miles. That's another example, right? So those are variables. It's very hard to learn that in class because it is understanding the customer requirement, the customer information, and taking that information and sort of creating your own itinerary and creating that perfect trip for them.
Great point. So Ricardo, why don't we turn it back over to you to kind of take us to the next level of discussion around,
No, to Marco's point, which I totally agree, right? The value of internship, I think, nowadays it's almost, guarantee. Everyone understands the value of having these sort of tests, right? Being in this position of testing what we've learned and even testing ourselves a little bit, right? And when we place this into, let's say, an academic framework, universities themselves, obviously they understand that the students have this need, right? They request to them, like, listen, I want, either because it's part of the curriculum, number one, so universities need to have these channels to place students properly, or just because, students want to do these kinds of things. Why? Because it's such a competitive world nowadays that when you're showing your resume, of course, you want to have all of these milestones that kind of tell your future or potential employer that, listen, I've done all of this, I've been tested, right? I've acquired these skills. And when we put this, so all of this is valuable by nature. Now imagine all these internship opportunities abroad, right? So you accumulate so much more value in all of this. You're doing all of that, plus you're doing it in a totally different context, right? And I think this is kind of like, so internship is like I would say it's like the Ferrari of study abroad, right? Because it is, one, because those are difficult to handle and to manage and to place everyone. It's a difficult task, right? It's not easy. And there is universities have this need, right? The students are asking them for placements. Universities themselves want to compete in a global world, right? They compare with each other. So they want to say, they want to have this value to their audience, to their students of, listen, through our channels, we can place you abroad. And this is when Sippin, let's say, fits really well. Sippin, I say Sippin FLAD fits really well in the equation. So what we're offering, and it's part of the success, I would say, is we're offering the solution that is very much needed, right? It's not only coursework, it's already, going deep in the society and in the work landscape, and have these channels to place them. So let's say all the means are in place. And if in the meanwhile, we can introduce students that, you don't have to have like a language or culture motivation. You might have, if you do fantastic, but you might not have. You might be just appealed by the work, by the position that you want to gain skills from, right? And if in the meanwhile, given FLAD's DNA, if we can introduce these interns also to some exposure, some degree of exposure in terms of language, culture, even better, right? So we're preparing workforce. We're providing organizations here, as Marco was saying, with the possibility to have this global talent, right? This different perspective, this different way to refresh their HR logic and their way of doing things. And we've had this feedback from organizations, and it's quite awesome, right? They're not doing any favor. They're also benefiting, and we always underline this. They're also benefiting from this. So it's a win-win all around. And plus, we're, to my point, we're introducing also the Portuguese aspect that sometimes might not be, in your face, but it's obviously there because they're living here. And they return to their universities in the States, and they might be knocking on the Portuguese program, if there is one, knocking on their door because they've now been introduced to Portugal. They want to carry on with that. And what we're seeing after 5 years is we're seeing students, some of them that were interns, students with an intern hat, returning to Portugal for a master's, for a PhD, on a Fulbright grant, just as more frequent visitors to work. We have. I'm thinking about 2. I don't know if there is more, but now I'm thinking about 2 that are living here, working. I mean, working, not studying, not working, totally integrated. So all of this fits really well in this idea of bridging the Atlantic through student mobility. So it's been a great experience, and everybody wins, let's say.
Can you talk a little bit about the different industries that you offer through their program? I actually was speaking with a young person this past weekend who is studying forensic psychology and also criminal justice. And, is that something that is offered through the program? And if not, like if somebody says, I want to do this, but I don't see that industry listed, is that something where you can maybe help kind of find an opportunity?
Right. We're among friends, right? So I'm going to share a little bit about the story, right? In terms of focusing on the internship program. Well, as you probably know, so FLAD is is 36 years old here in Portugal. It's very prestigious organizations, and during its history, of course, touching many different areas, many different institutions and people that are within, let's say, our network, right? So the potential is here, right? There is already links that are some, let's say, pre-established that could be leveraged also to serve the internship purpose. It is true that all of these internship opportunities are for academic credit, meaning that the students need to be registered and need to sit in the classroom. No, not every day, not at all, but once a week for 1 hour, have these regular meetings. But with the internship processes, this is one of the Sippin programs where FLAD can really leverage more of its potential, right? Because we're not confined to a list of course offerings taught in English or Portuguese, right? So we can really go beyond the walls of the campus, let's say. And since FLAD, operates on a nationwide and wants to serve, the purposes of the country as a whole, we can excel more. So there is more potential, right? So this was like, let's say, the base of the internship program. In the beginning, we understood that, okay, we need to have something to show. We need to have a sample of organization, places for students to look at, and students and universities, partners in the States, to understand, okay, what are these guys doing? Are they legit, right? So we've initiated this process of creating a sample of opportunities, and we've listed them in our previous website, company, and even we went all the way down to role description. Right? So students, this was a lot of information, was very precise. It was great because students could really, see on the site exactly what they could be doing. But we all know, and Marco can back me up here, I would say, organizations change all the time, right? Today you have this project. IBM now is doing this in artificial intelligence, but tomorrow is probably doing something with supercomputers. So it was nearly impossible to have this database always up to date. And sometimes, because we are working and always talking about these things, sometimes we are like, okay, this is perfect for these students. But because the students saw, IBM or whatever, you would say that, oh, these guys are trying to, sending me to something that I did not want, but we know that would be better because we know the person that is in there. So we've kind of changed a little bit. And now what we say is that we show a sample of the organizations that we were able to place the interns recently, to give sort of like a tone about the kinds of opportunities that we make available. And we zoom in after we see the profile. It is true we're a fairly recent program here. Sometimes we receive those forensic students or students from areas that, there is not a direct match here. So in those cases, we trigger from scratch. So we start the research on who do we know or who could we contact to be able to successfully place this student. One thing that we at FLAD are very proud of is that we've been able to place all students who apply. So there was not a single student that was not placed at the end. Some was not like a first option or second option, had a little bit of more work, but we were able to place them all, and with very interesting levels of satisfaction. But about expectations, maybe we can talk a little bit about a bit later on. I'll leave it to Mark.
I think it's important to also understand, I think, Ricardo, you hit it on the nail on the head as far as, opening up opportunities. And obviously if someone comes from a different area, because we are at the end of the day talking about people, students, right? And we use the same methodology with our trips, right? We customize, we curate a trip for each passenger, each group. It's all individually tailored. And the same methodology applies to interns because, starting from the basic principle as a business, obviously our job is to continue to grow the business, to increase our sales, our revenue, to make sure our clients are happy with it. We can only do that by having staff that really are experts in the product and can deliver that service to the utmost level, to the highest level possible. In order to mold and transmit that message to an intern, you have to start with the level of going to different organizations. And in this case, I'm including universities, schools, organizations itself, trade schools in some cases, and letting them know who Sagres Vacations is in this case, letting them know who we are, because just like we're talking here, there is a misconception sometimes of what the intern will be doing, what he or she will be doing, what is the tasks of this business. And sometimes, I think, Ricardo, you mentioned IBM, HP, Google. Just because you have a big name behind you does not mean that you're going to be on the front line of coding or developing the next search engine, right? So we're very upfront and very transparent. This is what we expect, and this is what we want an intern to do. And I think it helps bridge the gap between that period of time of an intern may or may not be happy with what they're doing because this is not what they expected. And sometimes it's very easy to flip a switch on a description and send it out to a multitude of different organizations saying we're accepting interns. The hardest thing is to really invest in that person, he or she, and make it very concise, very detailed, and let them know, here's the tasks, A to Z. Here's what we would want to see after 90 days, after 120 days. Here's what the company does. Here's all the exciting things we've done in the past, just to avoid that gray area, because I think it's a lost opportunity for the business, in this case us, and the intern, because that could be a marriage that goes really bad really quickly, and otherwise could have been a great match. So I think sometimes we forget the human element. You have to communicate. We have to be very, very detailed, and start with the organization that schools and universities, and reaching out to all these, and including obviously with FLAD and PALCUS and everybody else, letting them know this is exactly who we're looking for. So there's very little sort of gray areas, to repeat my statement, of what an intern may or may not want to do.
I think it's really accurate, because I mean, even I've been in situations where we're hiring an intern and they, say, well, I'm interested in working for this company, but, I was really hoping to do more management work. It's like, well, you're an intern, right? And you're here to learn, not lead strategy at this level. And so I would love to talk a little bit about, because there's different levels of expectations, right? There's the expectations on the student side. So what should students expect when they go into an internship? And, and this can differ whether it's on the US side or in Portugal. What kind of attitude should they have going into it? What should they expect in terms of, level of work, level of responsibility, those kinds of things, or just work ethic and that kind of thing. And I would love to hear, like Marco, from you, when you have an intern, like what's the expectation for somebody that comes in? And what kind of qualities also are really important? Self-starter, or are you looking for somebody, I could. Of course,
there's a multitude.
Lead you. Yeah.
Of course. And there's, I think the biggest thing we look for is obviously accountability and ownership. I think those are traits that are very important for us. In our business, we're making, very difficult decisions and planning people's travels, which should be always a very positive and happy type of atmosphere. So when we make mistakes, it's costly. It's costly for us. It's costly for a client. So we try to minimize those. Of course, we're all human. We make mistakes. We get that. But we also want to be accountable for our own mistakes. We want to be accountable when we do things right. We also want to be accountable when we do things wrong. And also, the biggest thing, and this is regardless if they're an intern or if it's an employee starting, my biggest sort of ask in this case, or requirement, is that someone, number one, believes in themselves, but also is not afraid to challenge the status quo. And this is important, because even though, and again, going to the misconception or sometimes the perception of being an intern, you're sort of the low totem pole. We get it. You're starting out, you're in a different organization. But the people who are really successful are the ones that really challenge the status quo in a professional, positive manner. So I'll give you specific examples. Because we've been doing ABC for the same way for 10 years, does not mean that there is not a better way. And I am very transparent and open to all my employees and interns that work with us in both our offices, in our Fall River office as well as in our Portugal office, and say, I want you to challenge us, because you're out there, you're seeing things from in many cases a younger eyes, right? From these dynamic environments of social media that I am not up to speed on, and nor do I have the time to. So a lot of the great ideas we've had in the past from a business standpoint have not come from the senior team here at Sagres, including myself. They've come from employees. They've come from interns. And we actually try to stimulate that, because number one, it gives them some sort of purpose. It gives them a sense of accomplishment too. And it kind of stays away from that rule of just sort of going with the status quo and not challenging and just saying, filling out the day and filling, and going through the motions. To us, and again, I put myself in that position all the time. I would love to be 20-something years old and be able to challenge someone in a professional way and say, let's try this, and just follow it through and see what other options out there. So that's one of the biggest things that we look for.
That's great. Ricardo?
Awesome. In terms of the expectation management, it's such a rich theme for someone who's like in the middle of all of this, right? Sometimes we see it coming, right? We are already starting to develop this expertise of, okay, anticipate, let's say, challenges. But starting from the beginning, and with practical examples. Okay, a student applies, decides to participate in an internship that Sippin will facilitate. Just the time aspect is already here a difference. A student in the States, a student from good school wants to prepare it's next summer, 1 year in advance, starts the communication process with us very early. That's great, that's fantastic. But sometimes it's not easy for us to get a fast response from the institution in Portugal, because depending on the organization, of course, but you're talking to me in, say, October. For someone who might be coming in June, I mean, I'll respond to that sometime in March. So, but this is just students want to organize themselves. Organizations, of course, are sometimes very busy. Their work is always morphing. So, let me get back to you later. So we have to manage this part of, it's not that organizations do not want you. It's just sometimes a bit too early.
That's the cultural difference as well, isn't it, Ricardo, too? Because timing, we all know time.
At all levels, at the student level and our level, all levels.
Sure. And time follows a different hierarchy, let's say, in Portugal, doesn't it? So I mean, we have to understand that.
That's another misconception, and I can jump to the time thing real quick. Sometimes for whatever reason, students embody this idea that I'm running on Portuguese time, and that's very dangerous, especially if you are in the workplace, right? Sometimes I use this thing. I can be late sometimes more than 1 hour for a dinner at friends on a Saturday night, but 5 minutes in some cases it's not acceptable, even in the Portuguese time logic. So, at first, make sure you do understand the different concepts of time before you run the risk of, being a bit rude or disrespectful. That's a different story. But going back to the internship and the practicalities of it, the fact that we always have this academic logic attached to the practical work, it's also a way, besides the credits, and it's almost like as a law, a necessity here, also for law reasons and visas and everything. Besides that, it's also a way for us to mitigate those problems. I was looking at the welcome packet and what's the logic that the student should kind of follow during their stay. And in the very beginning, well, besides the interview that we such highly recommend even before both parties give green light, besides that, so students already here, the student in the first week should meet with a supervisor to lay down the learning objectives for their stay, right? For the internship. And this is very important because it kind of like, now a supervisor that is always very busy needs to sit down, and then it's implicit that you now have this commitment, right? You've laid down the goals. So student is much more oriented, and also the supervisor had to really think about, okay, what kind of work will this student will be doing during its stay? So and plus the weekly meetings, it's also a way for us to monitor, and if something is not going so well, we already become aware of it. And yes, in real life, sometimes student doesn't have like a mediator here, so he just needs to handle it himself. But in this case, the student can count also on FLAD, on Sippin to try to solve these issues. And in terms of expectations, students when they arrive, they become very anxious a little bit. Okay, how should I dress? Excuse me. How should I dress? How should I greet my boss or my supervisor? I would say it. And then again, if you're working on a startup, right, it's one thing. If you're working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's a totally different thing. So, right, in a startup, you can go in shorts. If it's summer, no problem. But if you're going to an institutional position, and to go back to the previous question that Angela made, we really, a wide array of, a governmental, non-governmental, for-profit, not-for-profit, so we can serve with virtually all kinds of profiles. So it really varies, depends on where are you going to work at. But we give those tips, and in the beginning, always play on the safe side. That's what we say, dress nicely, be on time, be respectful. And from there, you start to obviously, gain respect and understand what the logics are. And then it's a natural, right? Marco.
And I think that I was just going to sort of pick up on that, because I think that's so important. And I'm sure, Ricardo, your team does that for each intern, where you sort of prepare them because like you said, every opportunity is different. So if you're dressing for the Foreign Affairs Consulate is one thing. If you're dressing for a startup is something else, right? But, with us, we take that personalized approach very seriously. So when we do know that there's an intern possibly interested, we will be on the phone with them. We'll have, and now obviously with COVID times, we had a lot of Zoom calls, and, most of our team was virtual for some time. So we would jump on the call, and before they even accepted the internship or we accept the internship, we would have a conversation about a lot of those things. And I think that's so important, not to leave something to sort of, you want somebody who's coming to perform an internship, regardless of how long it is, to focus on how can I help that business, that company, right? They should not be focused on how do I dress or how do I act, or I know that. So we as a company try to mitigate and take away all of those other external factors by sort of having this conversation and understanding, hey, it's a casual environment. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about that. Here's the times, here's your break, here's your credentials, here's how you access it, here's all the structure behind you that you can access. Because a lot of times what I find, and again, this is just my personal opinion, and I could be way off here, but based on the interns that we've hired, and some of them have become full-time employees and are still with us. So we have a good sort of base to look at this, is that when you sort of leave a lot on open-ended, they start worrying about a lot of these finer details, a lot of these small things, and then the work does not get as accomplished timely. Or in our industry, timing is everything. So that's why I sort of mentioned that the culture, because we are under deadlines from everything from airlines to hotels to credit cards to everything. So people want their 10-day comprehensive itinerary to Portugal yesterday. They booked today and they're traveling next week and they want it done yesterday. So for us, it's very important to stay ahead and sort of mitigate anything that could be outside sort of question, right? Where they're not focusing on the job, but they're worrying about these other things. And I think from what I'm hearing, you're doing the same thing, which is great. And I think people should be interns who are looking at these opportunities should not be worried about these other smaller questions about, of course, you should always be professional. That's number one, regardless of where you are. But I think, the focus here is you need to gain experience from working with company ABC, and the company ABC needs to gain some experience with you and hopefully get to the next level.
For sure.
One thing that we had talked about again in our pre-discussion was when should somebody do an internship, and the fact that US students actually have a little more flexibility in when to do that in their academic career, because, I guess it depends on which university you go to, but most cases, even if you declare when you, like say I declare business when I enroll in a university, the following semester, if I decide that's not what I want to do anymore and I want to change majors, that's a possibility. So whereas in Portugal, it's a little bit more restrictive. And so Ricardo, you can talk about that. But what are the benefits to doing internships sort of right off the bat, right? To kind of help figure out really, what do I want to do? Because that seems to also be something that's, plaguing our young people as they're coming out of college. And if they didn't, if they weren't like, I'm going to be a veterinarian, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a very specific thing. Some of the young people in my life, it's like, well, I just really don't know, So if you could both talk about the benefits of doing internships early on, and multiple internships, perhaps exploring different avenues, that would be great.
Sure. Well, as we said, having the opportunity to intern somewhere, it's a test, right? So the sooner you start to have these checkpoints of testing yourself, testing what you've learned, testing your taste, right, for your career. And as you were mentioning, Angela, in this case, I love the US model. This more of a liberal arts approach is the major minor logic, right? So you are building your concentration, your course concentration, right, your major as you go. And this is fantastic. So if at the end of of your freshman year, if you have the chance to do an internship in an area that you are inclined to, right, you have the chance to feel the temperature in reality, right? Oh, this validated what my hypothesis, or maybe not so much. And you still have time to direct the boat to something that will better serve you, versus in Portugal, that you just jump with 17 years old to a full degree, to a bachelor's program, and from day one until the last day of school, which courses you will be taking to obtain certification in that specific angle. So it's a much more stiff, much more rigid logic. It doesn't mean that you should not be doing internship also in Portugal, of course, but I think the US promotes this logic much more, awards people more for doing this. And there is another, Mark, before I close here, there is one really good thing about the US model, which is the academic calendar, and the fact that leaves the entire summer. Usually classes end around mid-May or so, depends quarter or semester, and then you have the entire summer until second half of August to invest in your own development, being whatever format. And that's great because it leaves this space for you to do these kinds of things. While in Portugal, the exam phase tends to stretch much more, with the first phase, second phase, and then August, we know it's in August, everything stops, and so it does not promote this idea of curricular or within a curriculum logic in internships. This is my main points here.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think obviously owning a business on both sides of the Atlantic, we see opportunities that I think sometimes are missed by understanding exactly what Ricardo said. That the system sort of works against you a little bit in Portugal from an intern that is looking to do something early on, because you are sort of sidelined one way. You're sort of pushed into one direction. And in the States, let's face it, sometimes interns will be interested in a position here and there because they talk to someone that they're friends with, and because they've shown an interest and say, you know what, I'd really love to get some experience here and there. Or it just, as they go through the first early years of college, it makes sense for them to change their major, or they gain new interest in a particular area. What I find sometimes we fail to just educate the students in general is the fact that you can, and especially here in the United States, and there may be special circumstances in Portugal where you can do this as well. You can, and I would encourage to start the internship level at an early stage, because the more experience you have is going to always be valuable regardless of the industry. And I think real life work, business, healthcare, whatever industry you have, is going to be the key today and tomorrow, from a student that's going to be graduating with just a diploma than the student who's going to be graduating with real life experience and going to work with either the company that they interned or going to a different company, but already with examples that they can challenge the senior management with, because they've done this, they've accomplished it, they've seen it, as opposed to just reading and hearing about it. And if you start doing that at an early level, you can just build on that and build on that and build on that, versus perhaps waiting at the senior level or the senior year or college year, or additional years after that. Once you graduate, then your time becomes much more limited, and the intern itself is going to feel a little bit more pressure to sort of accomplish a lot on an internship. So that's sort of my takeaway from there too. I always encourage, and certainly I'm encouraging my kids, they're not at that age yet, to have any real life work example. It doesn't have to be travel, but just be out in the business world, be out in the world, because I think today is so important to communicate, to understand the different cultures, to be able to know how to do business in different cultures, because it makes more sense.
I was going to say, I was just thinking, for the lack of an HR specialist that, could also provide information on how to look at the resume. I'm thinking I can even share my personal experience in a way that one of the internships that I've done, which was in the US, again, this idea of the abroad logic, I think it's part of the reason of why today I'm doing what I'm doing. It was a 6-month experience in a consulate, at the Portuguese consulate in Boston. And this, it's incredible how sometimes, or it's the most natural thing actually to happen. Because of an internship that you think, okay, I'm going to have this experience, that seeds that sometimes, opens the way for something that can be a bit more decisive. For your career, can be a trigger point. And it was, I believe, in my case, but just a personal information I was taking while Mark was sharing.
Ricardo, I know you said that you might have a video that you might want to show. We're coming to the end. Do you still want to?
Yeah, no, for sure. My idea was to show the clip in the beginning, just to to set the tone within the study abroad logic to kind of. But I think it's, if you allow me, Angela, I think it still makes sense.
Let's go ahead and show it. And while you're setting that up, I'll just ask the two of you to think about an action item you'd like to give our viewers at the end when we wrap up. Whether it's students that are watching, whether it's a business owner that could accept interns, anything.
Very good.
No, we can't hear it.
You cannot hear it? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Usually when you click share, and you have to make sure to click share computer sound.
My bad. Share sound. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's a bit generic on Sippin, but at least hopefully brings the audience, especially the students, to the vibe, right?
Sure. There we go. That was great.
Thank you. Just to set the tone a little bit.
Yeah.
A little
all right.
teaser, right?
So to wrap it up, action items for the folks watching this video. And it could be one, it could be multiple. Ricardo.
I mean, I could start if you want.
Okay, no, Marco, go ahead.
So I think I'm going to direct this to the interns, because we're talking about internships, and we talked a lot about expectations, but I want to go back to a point that we originally touched on. It was something about what can you as an intern bring to a table, right? Bring to the table, and how can you impact the company or the organization you're coming with? And sometimes interns are just so preoccupied with a lot of these other things and sort of filling out this prerequisite of having an intern that they forget the value that they already have, their personality, their self-confidence, their real life world experience. So I would challenge anybody who is listening, and if you are thinking about doing an internship, to think about that value, to think about what can you bring to the table and how can you positively impact that organization and that company in a good way, and help it grow, because not only will the company grow, but obviously you will gain real world experience. And I think that's what we're talking about here is sort of matching the two and making it one. So so that's my action item.
Love it. Ricardo.
Great point, Marco. My action item is just, what can I say? It's just to, if there are students out there, right, don't be afraid to, to expose yourself, really, to initiate this connection, interaction with the real life now. I mean, no need to be afraid of anything. And especially there are these fantastic opportunities at Sagres Vacations in programs like Sippin, and there is scholarships also through PALCUS, through Sippin. There are also ways that can mitigate other potential challenges or worries that you can have. So do your research, expose yourself. You're not going to regret, right? Especially now I'm talking about interning in Portugal. And maybe we're talking with students that have predisposition to Portugal for obvious reasons. It's also a way to, you tick so many boxes, right? By coming to Portugal, spend a summer or a semester here, work in an organization in Portugal, reconnect, start to create your own network. It's decisive. These kinds of, not only for resume elements that we already talked about, but you'll be with other students, interns in your situation, and you're going to grow old and they will too, right? And you'll have this network, this tissue of support, really, and of sharing information, sharing opportunities. So as a takeaway, do it. And there are ways and programs that can facilitate your life.
I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you both for your time today. I hope that our message resonates here. If you're a student out there, please consider applying to the Sippin program, whether it's for the internships or the study abroad or both. And if anybody out there is interested in travel management, I'm sure Marco would be more than willing to serve as a mentor, if not have an intern, even virtual,
even virtual, yes.
And again, if you found this session valuable, please become a PALCUS member and send us your thoughts and suggestions. We are always open to feedback from the community. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you both for participating. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Ricardo.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Mark.